Good evening, everybody. Warm welcome to another virtual discussion of IAFA. In last 10 years, we have never done any book discussion, but having discussion on Lord Desai's autobiography is honor and pleasure. So warm welcome to you all. Special welcome to Lord Desai when I see London is locked down from all sides. Now, Lord Desai need no introduction. Everybody sees him on television from channel to channel. He's the first Asian Labour peer for life, MA from Bombay, PhD from Berkeley, more than 30 years, LSE, retired as a professor of economics, 30 books to his credit. He's a global citizen, global thinker, and I will not preempt what he's going to say, what others are going to say. I will just briefly share my impression, which I have gone through the book. First is when you read the book, the enormous detail and eye for details. Whether he's standing in balcony in Bombay or Baroda, he can tell which road is going to right, which is going to left, which board is hanging, then all his relatives, their date of birth, date of marriage, grandchildren, every detail is there. Second is, man of his stature, his English is so simple, unassuming. It's not like reading Salman Rushdie or not even reading Gurcharan Das and difficulty difficulty of being good. Not even our friend Shashi Tharoor, who makes you consult your dictionary from page to page, is very, very simple, unassuming, very, very readable language. Third is his honesty and frankness. I don't think many persons of his stature can be so candid. All the people of pubescent age, teenagers, when might have during college, university days, might have masturbated, but I don't know how many economists have put in a black and white book that when he turned 14 and was aware of sexuality, he masturbated. And he has very frank opinion about sex, love, and relationship, says everything is fine so long as two adult consenting adults decide to think everything. But he draws a red line saying that academics, the professors do not exploit the vulnerable student and seek sexual favors for giving academic exercise. So his frankness, I mean, undisarmingly, when he was asked to take oath, he said, on which book you would like to take oath, he said, any book will do, from Mark to Bible. So the person was flabbergasted what he's saying. And he has a terrific sense of humor also from place to place. I mean, when he was not promoted, he asked, why not? They told him, you have too many ideas. you should focus on few ideas rather than having too many ideas. So he has been all through this. Then his amazing context. I mean, I have never seen a book. He has contexts all over the globe, every country, hardly any place you really don't find context. So you have from Milton Friedman to Paul Samuelson to Harold Lasky to Sukhmay Chakrabarti to Amrit Sen, and then you come down to your friend like Bill Clinton to David Cameron to Neil Kinnock to Michael Putter. You name it. You have got maybe in book maybe more than 5,000 people who are achievers, role models who have shaken the world. They are all there. The next thing is he's a footloose. I mean, he is prepared to go anywhere for the idea. Okay, UK is okay, USA is okay, Belgium is okay, Australia is okay, but he goes to Algeria. He goes to Sierra Leone. How many of you have gone to Sierra Leone? So Lord Meghnad Desai can go anywhere so long as there are ideas. There are a lot of tender human touches in the book. I was very touched when he was holding hand of his daughter in Belgium when she was having meningitis. And also when he and his family got stranded in Moscow. It's freezing cold, it's snowing, they didn't know where the hotel is, and nobody understood English, French, or German which they could speak. And how they managed to reach the hotel is another story. And he is a person who has always been trying to do new things. And see, he has been associated with creating, how many of you know that the so-called the Human Development Index? He was one of the pioneers to have it created. And he was at LSE, he got to create what you call it, the Development Studies Institute. Then he founded the Center for the Study of Global Governance. He was also associated with American Society for Asian Political Economy, with which Rudolph Lloyd, Suzanne Lloyd, and Ralph Nicholas were associated. Lord Desai, all three were good friends of mine. When I was in Chicago, they have been to my house many times, great souls. And I think Rudolph and Susanna are no more, but Ralph still sends messages from time to time. And then he has of late become the forecaster. I mean, he forecasted victory of Narendra Modi in 2014, then 2009, 2019. And he forecasted the victory of Donald Trump. Because nobody really that time was believing Donald Trump become president. And he has also written a book called Is Donald Trump the Narendra Modi of America? Then another thing is political economy of Donald Trump. Is nobody really paid attention what he was trying to do, only trade war, much more than that. And he is also written Political Shock, Trump, Modi, Brexit, and the prospects of liberal democracy. So he's a man of all seasons. He was very closely associated, rather was a moving force behind the installation of Mahatma Gandhi's statue, Parliament Square, London, for which we all should be thankful to him. So Lord Desai, with these remarks, I leave the floor to you. You have the floor. You take 15, 20 minutes. Then I will ask other colleagues to say their thoughts. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And thanks everybody for coming, and my two discussants, Yashwant and Gurcharan. Thank you very much. I think you have very nicely summarized my book. Let me just say that who doesn't want to talk about himself? So the reason why I wrote the autobiography is that I like talking about myself. But then, of course, you have to restrain yourself and not talk too much. So I thought what I would do is I would rapidly go through my career, partly because in some sense it is a unique career, especially that somebody from fairly middle class circumstance can have as much fun and experience of traveling in different countries, meeting different people, doing things which I always wanted to do. I always sort of envied the idea that there are some people who get paid to read and write. I remember many years ago when I was young and I was getting these theater arts sent by the American embassy. There was a picture of Arthur Miller sitting at his desk, writing. I thought, this is the life I want. I want this life. I'm sitting at a desk, I'm writing, and that's all I have to do in my life. Well, I had to teach as well. But so that's one idea. And then, I really wanted to call the book Could Do Better, because that has been a sort of the story of my life. My parents always thought that, he talks too much, but he's never going to do anything. So, there's one more thing to climb, one more rung to get to. So anyway, I was forbidden by my wife and various friends from saying that. He said Indians would not understand these sorts of British style modesty. You have to boast about yourself. So I said, okay, rebellious Lord will do. So a mixture of bad and good. So no, I think I don't want to say very much, because over my lifetime I have found very, very immensely good people, especially on the teaching side, and very friendly people. And there have been experiences, some good, some bad, but at the end of it, I have come out very well. And the one key that I will mention, which the ambassador did mention, is that I have this passage where I say when I was doing this intercollegiate theater, I acquired this idea that basically look at today's crisis from tomorrow's angle, and all crises will appear manageable. So I think that's one thing I've always used very much, and so I think I will stop there because other people should talk, not me, because they can talk more freely about my book than I can. I can become boring. Okay, so go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't mention that you have lifelong love for theater. Even early engage, you're doing Dial M for Murder. You have done French Kafka's Diaries. If you had continued, you might have given tough time to Richard Burton, and you might have found Elizabeth Taylor somewhere waiting for you.
Well, hopefully, no, I liked writing more than acting. I don't think I was a very good actor, but I liked writing plays.
But you did many
Unfortunately,
Gujarati plays in London, no? Gujarati plays in London.
I did Gujarati plays in London, but it was a pretty ramshackle stuff. I had to do most of it myself. But when I was in Philadelphia,
Hmm.
to be part of a proper theater group, as I was, that was very enjoyable because everybody was enthusiastic. They were all amateurs, but very well-to-do amateurs, and they were very fond of me, and I really enjoyed their company. Again, I wouldn't have seen ordinary American people if I had not been interested in theater. So I'm
That's
grateful
good.
to the theater for that.
Okay, Gurcharan, floor is yours. Gurcharan, floor is yours. You are also having audio problem. Your audio, yes, yes,
You can hear me now.
yeah. Now we can.
Well, the best thing to say is that I enjoyed this book. And the first duty of a writer is to entertain. And this entertained. You talked about theater, and that's what I also wrote plays in my 20s. And so I was given that as the first motto in the actor's studio when I was in New York. And I was trying to learn a little bit about theater. So Surendra, you've told us to ask Meghnad questions. And
Go
so
ahead.
we'll make an effort to ask him some questions. So my first question, Meghnad, is it true what they say that reliving a life is better than living it? In other words, did you enjoy writing about yourself more than living yourself? And Proust thought this was true, and so did Kalidas. It makes sense because the memory of an event is superior, richer than the event itself. And simply because when you're living your life, there's so much going on that you hardly notice. I mean, you don't notice the color of the walls, you don't notice some very beautiful things that are going on because you're so intent on getting something done. And but when you're really reliving it, as you said, like Arthur Miller, you're sitting at your desk and you're relaxed and you can choose what you want to write about. Now, you've written about everydayness, and I have celebrated that
You
in
have, yeah. Thank you.
in the blurb that I have given in this book. I have said, I won't read the whole thing, just say, its special charm is its authentic everydayness. One person's life honestly captured is not only unique, but the only certain data of history we possess. So now by everydayness, I don't want to give the impression to our listeners that you're talking about how many times you went to brush your teeth, or whether you had dokla for lunch or at tiffin. No, but it is courageous to write about everydayness. And what I was trying to say is that when you're reliving your life, you can focus on certain things and leave out other things. And in the end, make yourself look even better than you are. Since memory also flatters a person, the end product of a memoir is a bit of fiction. After all, Mark Twain was right when he said the only difference between fiction and nonfiction is that fiction has to make sense. So, this is my first question, put rather obtusely, about how you found the business of reliving your life, Meghnad. My second question is, why didn't you give us more masala about the rich and the famous, about the on-market gang?
Juicy, mister.
Now, I have, as I said, applauded you for writing about ordinary people and everydayness. In fact, I don't know about you, but I find famous people often disappointing, boring, and self-serving, almost always on stage, guarded, paranoid about their image. Ordinary people don't need to pretend. They're real and spontaneous. So I myself liked your book for that down to the earthness in it. But nevertheless, to be very honest, since you met all these people, and Surendra has just cataloged a few of those famous names, I think what I missed and what your readers are going to miss is the masala in their lives.
Masala dosa.
And so maybe that's the second question. Since you were privy to that masala, why didn't we have more of it? The third point I want to make is, and it's another question, Meghnad. Now, every generation is happy to celebrate its victories, but it tends to gloss over its failures. I missed some of the failures of our generation in your book, and I wondered why. Autobiography, by reflecting honestly on a single life, can make amends. And the failures of our generation are many. Let me point out a few just to stimulate your mind. The big one certainly is not to have come to terms with India's partition. And here I know you and your lovely wife have worked hard on these partition archives, partition museum, etc. But I would have liked to have seen a little more in your book, considering that this was perhaps the most horrendous event in the life of this subcontinent over the last 100 years. And books like ours need to bring closure and can help to bring closure. Now, maybe we haven't had our Tolstoy. Tolstoy brought closure to the Russian people in War and Peace, in that on the Napoleonic War, the horror of the Napoleonic Wars. So let me just go to a second one. You know better than anyone that we stepped unthinkingly into the shoes of the departing ships without bothering to reform the colonial institutions or fashion a new modernity true to the spirit of a new India, a free India. The third failure is we persisted, of course, you've touched on this, we persisted with the wrong economic model, robbing our people of economic freedom, condemning them to the nasty license Raj. A fourth failure, in the name of secularism, we refuse to have an honest conversation with tradition. And this may be one of the things that paved the way for Hindutva. Finally, my generation, I believe, our generation failed to integrate inclusively the English language into our lives, condemning the masses to being deaf in their own country. Now, to me, these letdowns hang like dark clouds over an otherwise happy life. And
Gurcharan, let him reply.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is right now my turn. So I'm going to pose this thing.
Absolutely.
Finally, Meghnad, I'm sure you have found many charms in writing an autobiography. I've always felt one of these is to appear considerable in the eyes of your friends. Another is to draw attention to your nicer side, so they forget your embarrassing moments, including the jokes you may have played on them. A third is to get even with your enemies, not by saying nasty things about them, but about saying nicer things about yourself. Of course, you have to be careful. If you appear to be too good, people will think you're pompous, stuffed shirt. But of course, as a Labourite, you're not that. Tories are supposed to be that. Nor must you look too bad, or they'll think you're a pathetic loser. So it's best to be yourself. And I think you've done quite a lot. You've done a good job of that. I feel we see a real person after reading the book. We feel we know a real person. And so I really want to know, what were your motivations, Meghnad? Rebellious Lord, I love the title, but I did not see enough rebelliousness, Meghnad. We needed to see more rebelliousness, because I think underneath that gentle spirit that you have given us, there is that. And finally, you and I have gone through an age with a lot of clash of ideas in our lifetimes. I'd have liked to seen, because you deal with them in your columns, in your writings, a little more. Obviously, this is not a book about ideas, but nevertheless, when you have been in a place like LSE or Berkeley or where Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, etc., you've lived in the clash of ideas. So that's my 10 minutes over, Surendra. And
Yes, I think. Lord Desai, the real men should rise. The rebellious men should rise.
Are we taking Yash next before I come back?
I think if you want, you can answer, because then there will be too many questions you might forget. You want to answer now, or you want to wait? I think
I'll wait because I have written them down.
Okay.
I have noted down what
Gurcharan. Fine.
And thank you very much, Gurcharan. Very, very nice.
Okay, yes, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Surendra Kumar, and good evening to everyone, especially Meghnad. I'm sorry, I sort of walked in just from work, and I confess I read the last chapter in the car. It was sort of twilight, and I ended just in time. But I really enjoyed the book, and I'm going to spare you the questions, because Mr. Das has asked you some very serious questions. I will ask you one question in the end, if I may. But I thought, I'll just give my impressions of how I felt reading the book. I mean, this book was so well written that I read it in 2 days, despite work that I have on my plate. And I really enjoyed it simply because there were so many experiences that I could personally relate to. I mean, your younger days in Baroda. Now, while I wouldn't remember the places that you mentioned in the book, but I do remember spending 2.5, 3 months in Baroda in the beginning of my career, which was part of what is called a district training. So in February 1982, I was sent off to Baroda for 3 months. And I remember going to Chota Udaipur and, of course, places around. It was really wonderful, a wonderful experience, staying in Alkapuri in the circuit house. I must confess, I didn't particularly enjoy the sugar in the dal, but be that as it may, it brought back memories. And the way you describe your childhood, it was really, really good. And I really could relate to that. Of course, the other thing that you write about how in your family, people wanted you to write the civil services, the IAS exam, but you were academically inclined. And the way you went pursuing your education, then of course you went to Mumbai, then Bombay, and studied at Ruia College, and then of course to the US. And like someone like Dr. Ambedkar, who went to the US first and then came to the UK, you did the same, except that you stayed much longer, practically a large part of your life in the UK, which you made home. And now you sort of divide your time between the UK and India. Of course, Ambassador Kumar mentioned about the various places you've been to, and what struck me was Sierra Leone, because it reminded me of the UN mission there, the one that the Indian brigade that was deployed and then had to exit from there. And there was no military advisor in New York, and I had to do the needful. But anyway, I'd love to have gone to Freetown and Hastings, and I forget the name of the corporal who was the rebel leader at that point of time, Sanko, Fode Sanko, if I remember correctly. But anyway, I think that book really brought back some of these. I mean, you had siblings who didn't go abroad, you went abroad. I had three siblings who all went abroad and studied, all academics except me. I was left to write the civil service exam. Not that I regret not going abroad and studying, but it was an option in case I didn't make it to the civil services. But my sisters keep telling me that you're just an MA and we are all doctors. And I said, yes, I am undereducated. And I wish I had time, maybe I still have, to pursue a PhD. But I think the fact is that I'm at a younger generation, let's put it, I'm probably the youngest person on this panel, or certainly on the panel, but certainly I'm among the viewers. But I was wondering why Ambassador Surendra Kumar asked me to be on this panel. One, whether I was High Commissioner in London, but there were many High Commissioners in London, or did Meghnad recommend my name, or did Kishwar recommend my name? Because I remember meeting Meghnad, when was it? I think I reconnected with Kishwar at the India Today conclave in 2011. And I'm not sure were you there, Meghnad, with her at that point of time. But when I'd seen you so often on television and radio articles and continue to do so, that even if I hadn't met you, I thought I knew you. But that is why I feel that when you read that book, you feel that you're actually reliving certain experiences that you may or may not have had, but you can certainly visualize. Ambassador Kumar mentioned about the experience in Moscow with your children. The one that I read about with horror was the Great Barrier Reef and how you almost drowned. Fortunately, I was a reasonably good swimmer, so perhaps I may have been luckier. But you were so forthright in what you write. I mean, LSE, the India House was what we had 100-foot journey program project with the LSE. We used to go there very often. We were neighbors, practically. We are neighbors. And we did a lot with the LSE. And of course, the LSE has a formidable reputation, in no small measure to what you have been able to achieve in terms of the economics department. And I mean, you mentioned Lord Stern. I remember having a lot to do with him when I was in London. And I remember a delightful Egyptian lady, if I remember, was the director. And I think she's turned to politics, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about your book because there's so many things that you write about, some which are personal, some which are of great interest, your time at Berkeley, your involvement with politics, with student politics, with Marxism, with the anti-Vietnam protests and the occupations in LSE are something that we'd all read about. When I joined university, it was the fag end of the, at least in Delhi University, people sort of going and joining the Naxalites or spouting leftist, sort of extreme leftist Marxist Leninist theories. Having done my master's in history, I did have some brilliant leftist lecturers in Delhi University, especially for my master's, and really enjoyed reading their works. But the way you described how your evolution took place, and then ultimately, I think it was 1974, when you were in Islington, you joined the Labour Party. And then your rise within the party, and of course, parallelly in the academic field. And I think that really makes you not only just a multifaceted personality, but a polymath. I mean, you're an academic don, a brilliant academic don. You're a political commentator of some repute. You are a politician in the sense that you entered Parliament in the House of Lords and were involved in student politics. You're a dramatist, a playwright, who's pursued his interests right through in Baroda and Bombay, in Berkeley and in London. So, I mean, there are so many facets of your personality that come out in this book that I would certainly recommend those of you who haven't read it, you should. It's a very easy read. And the questions that Mr. Das has asked obviously need to be answered. But I have just one point, and that is with your politics, Meghnad. I know that you quit the Labour Party recently over anti-Semitism, if that's what I read. But beyond that, I think the Labour Party and India have had a problematic relationship in the last couple of decades, at least since Robin Cook and his famous statements. But even after that, and particularly after that, when I was in London, I had a reasonably pleasant relationship with Jeremy Corbyn, but I realized that he was in the clutches, if I put it that way, of people who were very anti-India. And I used to wonder how the very large Indian diaspora would be supporting the Labour Party and not really taking up cudgels on behalf of India, if not on behalf of India, at least on behalf of good India-UK relations. And that is why when we try to reach out, especially to the councillors, British Indian councillors, British Council of Indian Origin, there are quite a few at the grassroots. We found a very sympathetic audience, a very sympathetic interlocutors when we try to reach out to them. But in Parliament, except for a notable few, we found it difficult to really reach out. Of course, the annual Labour Party, I remember hosting receptions at Brighton twice and very well attended by shadow secretaries of state, once including the first time I think Jeremy Corbyn's wife very graciously came for that. But I soon realized that we had a real issue, a real problem in trying to get across. We had some very good meetings with the leadership, the labor leadership. But I always found that as far as the subcontinent or as far as South Asia, and I hate using that term, as far as India is concerned, there was a mental block because I think policy was being shaped by a coterie from Bradford and the Midlands and up north in Manchester. And they were the Mirpuris and the parliamentarians of Pakistani origin who shaped policy. And we've seen what happened before the last elections. And still, I think we have a problem, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there. All I wanted to do end with is to ask you your opinion, since you have been a devout Labour supporter, and Labour traditionally has been identified very closely with India as compared to the Tories, but things seem to be changing now. And even when I was there, I saw that perceptible change. How do you think, and this is not in your book, but I thought I would pose this question to you, how do you think uh, India, the government, and India as a whole can reach out or to sort of make sufficient contacts with the labor, and how do you think we should go about doing that so that we can neutralize the baneful influence of people who are anti-Indian, let's face it. And today we have a Tory government. We may have a Labour government in the future. We don't know when. Of course, Brexit and what happens. And I thought I'd ask you the second question about Brexit, but I won't. I think there'll be enough people in the audience who will. But I just wanted to put this question to you. How do you think India should reach out to the Labour Party? And who are the people there? And you don't need to mention names necessarily, but the sort of people that we can contact, get in touch with, and build a narrative which is truly reflective of the state of relations between our two countries, and more importantly, between our peoples, because with the flights being banned today, or at least suspended at midnight today, you see people, and I've been getting calls from desperate parents and relatives wanting to come back or go whichever way. But I think there is that connect which we unfortunately don't seem to be able to exploit as far as the Labour Party is concerned. So I'm going to leave it to that. It's a politically loaded question, I understand. Normally, I don't come on panels and I certainly don't make politically loaded questions, but I thought I would pose this to you because I know you have tremendous experience, not only in dealing with the people in the Labour Party, but in handling issues like this. And since you've been writing on India so frequently, coming on TV panels, etc., you know exactly what is happening in India and you know exactly what is happening in the UK. So I thought you would be the best person I could pose this question to. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Lord Desai, before you start replying to Gurcharan's question, a yes question, let me also ask a few questions of mine
Wow.
after reading your lines. And one page you write, many Indian Marxists are really Leninist with deep suspicion of the market and great faith in the state-controlled economy. Even among the communists, few people have ever read Marx economics. There is no defense of state regulation Marx. I remained a Marxist in my thinking on the long-run dynamics of capitalism while being wary of state control over the economy. This made me an anomaly in Indian eyes. I remained a Keynesian in my macroeconomic ideas. I was committed to reducing poverty and inequality and fighting discrimination. So, as a self-proclaimed Marxist and Keynesian, when you look back at India since independence, how have we fared in addressing the three issues: reducing poverty, inequality, and fighting discrimination? My second question, you have written about student agitation 1968-69, your effort to Tariq Ali, your effort to, you were yourself already president of the Students' Union, and we have written about freedom of student right and freedom of academy. Now, do you see any similarity in the student agitation of your time, late 60s, 68, 67? And what we have witnessed in our university like Jamia Millia and JNU in the last 2 years? Are these agitations in JNU and Jamia only the creation of the tukri again, or something more than that? Then there is a third question. You said that you couldn't really believe how come somebody like Ashok Mitra, who was sold out on his Naxalite principles, could be the chief economic advisor of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And then you say that with my experiences in UK, I had visions of being asked to join an armed struggle somewhere in Indian countryside. I was not ready to rule that option out totally. At that time, I was sufficiently in leftist politics to consider it seriously. In the light of these two positions, has the armed struggle of the Naxalite achieved their objectives? And conversely, how come the successive governments have not been able to address Naxalite problem in the last 60 years? And last question, Delhi School of Economics was a melange of political contradictions. On the one hand, we had left-wing revolutionaries of various hues, one redder than another. On the other hand, everyone in Delhi wanted to pretend that they were close to the center of power. Do you think the color red has turned saffron? As for some people, pretension to be closer to center of power, I think it still goes. Only different center of power has changed. Over to you, Lord Desai.
Okay, thank you all very much. Many questions. Let me sort of. I'm going to take Yash Sinha's question about India and UK first, because it also throws light on other things which have been asked. You see, when I became a peer in London in 1991, I came to the attention of the diaspora more than I had a few friends in diaspora, and I was at some reception, and they said, "Now you must fight India's cause." I said, "I'm not here as an Indian. I'm here as a British citizen." You know, when I went to America, I tried to be as much like American as possible. You know, join the natives is a simple slogan I have. And so I have never, ever thought I must fight India's cause. I know all about it. Now, on this particular thing, I think Britain and India have too much closeness. I mean, since independence, in 70 years, somehow they have not separated properly and rationally. I mean, I often get calls from the Indian press lobby in London. Sir, the parliament has put an early day motion denouncing Modi. I said, nobody reads an early day motion, for God's sake. Why are you worried? And what does it matter that in the House of Commons somebody asked a question? I mean, when Desai asked a question to the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister didn't even hear it. He said, "Oh yes, it's Kashmir. Yes, I mean, as an Indian asked him about Kashmir. Okay, I know the answer to that." So I think we have to de-escalate the sensitivities that India has about UK. It doesn't matter a damn what the British Parliament says about India. Not one jot. So that kind of thin-skinned way we look at it. What is interesting, we only worry about New York Times and Guardian. All Asian press can do what we like, but we are Western inclined. We only want to be praised by Western press and not criticized by Western press. I think my view is be a bit tough. Secondly, the functional answer to Yash's question is, I was when I joined in '91, there was still a lot of Indian diaspora membership of the Labour Party, and in 1992 election, I was sent to every constituency where there was a substantial Asian vote, so-called Asian vote, and I went everywhere. Everywhere I went, as farther away from London I went, the more. I only discuss Kashmir. The Miripuris and the Miripuris and the Pakistanis, the Indians were not interested in Kashmir. The British Indians never mentioned Kashmir. But the Miripuris and Pakistanis are absolutely obsessed about Kashmir. Now, what used to happen in Labour Party that we used to have motions on Kashmir from different constituencies. And every conference we had to what you call composite them, more or less, put them all together, some for, some against, and make a sort of khichdi, and so no sharp conclusion appears in that thing. And it used to be passed, nobody debated it. Now the Indians have left the Labour Party. The Conservatives have very steadily gone in, and they picked out that the Indian values are middle class values. They want to go to private schools, they want to make money, they want to be professional, they have absolutely no sympathy with the working class, they don't want to be thought as working class. And so, and Cameron has been very, very good on this. And so a lot of Indians, especially Hindus, I should say, have gone over to the Conservative Party. So when the Labour Party conference meets, no Indians have, as it were, contributed to the conference resolution. Now it's entirely Bangladeshis, but Bangladeshis don't care about Kashmir. Miripuris and Pakistanis. And you're quite right, Bradford and Rochdale and all that. So Labour Party no longer has any of the old association with India and India that it used to have, except that the old British left also has the same problem. They somehow think India should do what they tell India. They have this kind of also possessiveness. India is sort of ours, because we gave independence, which is not true, but we won't go into that. So I think there is too much of this, and I more or say, nothing. Further, also this great power syndrome. In British Parliament, people are always asking, what are we doing about Nagorno-Karabakh? What the hell can you do about Nagorno-Karabakh, for God's sake? Just calm down. Don't be a great power all the time. You have no power whatsoever. So Britain has to learn about its fall from grace. And we all have to kind of, So I sort of more or less don't take any interest in this because, it's like when your prime minister speaks in UN, all your newspapers are about what your prime minister said in UN. You look at any other country's newspaper, they don't even know your prime minister spoke at the UN. Right? It's the same sort of it. So anyway, that is my somewhat cynical answer to that question. And I could say that, my being drafted into do the Gandhi statue was a very clever ploy by Cameron. And I knew it was a clever ploy. I joined it with open eyes. I wanted the statue. I didn't care which prime minister, which party built the statue. But that was his ploy. I'm saying, how pro-India. And when Boris comes on 26th, if he's allowed to come, given the new strain of COVID, he's going to play that card. I can see now, because at least one of his wives has some Indian connections through her mother. Anyway, so that's it. Now, let me see a lot of those questions. One of the questions that Gurcharan asked about the failures. Why have I not discussed the failures of India? My defense is I have written extensively about them in my other writings. I have discussed the economic failure. I have discussed a basic fact that the colonial Raj just continued as Congress Raj, and there was no break. Because if you think about it, the Congress strategy, Gandhi's strategy throughout, was law-abiding breaking of the law. Never go out of the civilized discourse. He knew the British, he was a barrister, and throughout the argument was, because the important thing for Congress was maintain monopoly of power when independence comes. That's what it was all about. And I think that was successfully done. And the promise was, you give us power, we will look after the regime, we will look after the British Raj, and we will continue the British Raj. I won't go into the detail, but if you look at the First Amendment to the Constitution, it re-established colonial rule in India under independent government. But anyway, that's another story. But that's our choice. And I quite agree with you that the red has become saffron. Because you see, again, Indians have very simple, Indian citizens have a very practical attitude. There are no, actually, despite all the politics, there are no strong ideological feelings in India at all, maybe among the Naxalites. Basically, the middle classes think, these guys in power, how can we get access to them? We have to be Hindu national, okay, we'll be Hindu national. Kya jata hai? When people were secular, they were not really secular. You were secular in your front room, and you were Hindu in your kitchen. But if these guys want to be secular, we will be secular. And so that is, I think, very healthy. So if these guys are in power, let's get connections to them, because I have lived here and okay, I'm now a lord and so on, but I never felt any necessity at any time in London to know a minister, to get something done. I don't need the minister. I don't need my councillor or my minister to get my power, my water, my street cleaned. It's not necessary. But in India, you have to know these people to get your life together. And so that is a difference in why with politics in India, you have to be always aware of who is in power, what do they believe in, if they believe in anything, and so on. And then I think one of the interesting questions, I think the ambassador asked, the left in India has failed, spectacularly failed. I mean, you sort of committed suicide, but that's another story. But the Naxalites, very interestingly, they have lasted now nearly 60 years. Well, 55 years, because the first Naxal thing started in 60s, early 60s
67.
sometimes. Yeah. And so interesting is they go where the government is not. Because even now the government has not actually interpenetrated all parts, especially the Delhi government of all ideological colorings has not been able to deal with tribals. Tribals are the really excluded people. Dalits have managed somewhat, but tribals, because they're scattered, and there is no single tribal lobby. I'm now talking politically. There is no big vote bank of single tribal vote bank. It's all scattered, and the tribals in Middle India are different from the tribals in Northeast India, and so on. So that is being out of the electoral vote bank. Therefore, no politicians ever wanted to do anything for them. And that's where the Naxals got in. I've gone off my screen. Anyway, so I would say straight police action by successive governments has contained Naxalites, and we don't hear very much about them in the last 5 years or so. But they will continue because there is no way of, the system has not yet learned how to look after scattered sort of concentrations of tribals and looked after them. Now, many more. One thing I want to go back now to what Gurcharan started with. And he said about reliving is more fun than living, and I quite agree with me. And you see, one of the constraints are imposed on myself, that if I talk about other people, I don't want to mention any details that they might not want me to mention. I cannot invade their privacy without their permission. So things that I have done with friends or associates and so on, which may have had some masala in it, all that masala has been taken out, because for the masala I would have to have their agreement in principle that I can mention the more interesting bits of my life. So I think that's a self-imposed sort of constraint, and maybe I should write my next book, things I did not say or whatever. Now, I also agree with what you said about how members have to make sense, and similar to the quotation you had, where there's a thing in Aldous Huxley, one of Aldous Huxley's novel begins with this thing saying, the trouble with fiction is that it makes too much sense. Reality never makes sense. So, you have from your life to make a kind of fiction which is sensible. And also, if I mention everything I did, it'll be 1,000 pages and unreadable. So let's keep it readable. Let's keep it simple. And what else is here? There's something. My note says Marx. Now what? I think the ambassador mentioned something about Marx. I forget now what it was. My view is that not being in India, first of all, going from India to America and then coming to London gave me a very different angle on Marx than had I gone to UK. Because in the Cambridge and Oxford, the Marxism is very sort of tangled up with imperialism and all that, and American Marxism was all about a critique of their own society, which is a very different kind of Marxism than you find in UK. And I'm a bit of a I'm a lot a sort of academic nerd, so I had to read Marx before I taught Marx. So I sat down and read the 3 volumes of Capital, and of course by now several times. But I would not teach it just by reading somebody else's textbook and things like that. So I mean, it's great fun doing all this. And I got this idea. I wrote a book called Marx's Revenge, which some of you may have seen, when the Soviet Union collapsed. And I thought, this guy should read the Communist Manifesto. It is it's in praise of capitalism. If you read the Communist Manifesto, how dynamic it is, how it's transforming the world, how it's destroying the old and sort of encouraging the new. So anyway, I think there are 2 minutes left for questions from the audience.
We can take about 10 minutes. We can. Okay. Should I invite questions now?
Yeah, because otherwise I'll never stop. Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Is Ambassador Gonsalves still
I'm
there?
having fun. I don't know about other people.
No, I was especially keen to have...
I'm here, Surendra. I'm on.
Okay. Ambassador Gonsalves, please go ahead.
Well, Lord Desai, I've always watched you and listened to you very carefully, because I do find that you have sort of common interest in having truth and not worrying about opinions. And that, I think, has been a great blessing. And what I would like to say to you is only 1 or 2 things. One is that we are facing a great change in our social and economic thinking. As the powers that be wanted to undo globalization in the West, you had the Asians and the communists, as you say, aping the thing and wanting to keep the globalization with an Asian trend, with an Asian focus, and possibly with an Asian domination ultimately. However, of course, the coronavirus has created great, I think, in the economic and social fabric. And I'm not sure that a lot of things that have been taken for granted, particularly in the things like the leisure, hospitality, entertainment, all of this, I think, is going to go for a 6. I don't think that it will be possible to continue quite as you have in the past. And equally, of course, there will be a question of where the, shall we say, the aspiring powers, including us in India, go to. I accept what you say, that we tend to worry too much about a few people in the West in Parliament and so on. We don't really know what the rest of the West thinks. We don't know what the Chinese think at all. And for that matter, what the Indonesians or the Japanese or the Vietnamese think, which is really more important, I think, than most of Europe and so on. But I leave this to you to guide us in what you think the future is going to be in the next 10 years or so. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm often asked this question because Indians care about India. They don't care about anybody else, which is very healthy. And I think that it's quite remarkable what a mess the first generation after independence made of of the opportunity they had. I won't go into why and so on. Nice, well-meaning people, honest people, but whatever happened, I always say right off the first 40 years after independence, and Indian history starts in 1991 with Rao and Singh, at least in the economic sense. Of course, India has built one absolutely unique thing about India, which nobody else will ever take away, is it has been one of the most exemplary democracies in the world.
Yeah.
It's the only democracy which started with universal adult franchise at its origin. The French gave women rights only in 1946. So, and with 900 million voters, India still has elections and all that. And although the previous rulers criticize the current rulers, I don't take very much seriously the fact that these guys are suppressing opinion and all that. We all remember what Congress used to do to opposition. Anyway, I don't have time to go into that. I think it remains the strength. India's strength is not the Indian government; it's the Indian people. India is one of the biggest laissez-faire countries in the world if only the government would let it. Because there's an immense, when I meet the younger people, they're fantastic. They have a lot of energy, inventiveness. You see on a variety of things. Talk about environmental problems, talk about poverty. The thing people are doing on the ground is fantastic. If only the governments went there, India would be a fantastic place. But that's another story. So I'm optimistic because India has that capacity, that inbuilt capacity on the ground. And occasionally, now and then, periodically, we get some decent government and we get good growth rates, so on. China wasted 40 years of its history after the communists took over. But then they had Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping basically abandoned everything he believed in. Every communist belief he had about the economy, he abandoned. And he said, forget that. I'm going to Meghnad Desai's Marx about capitalism. And I'm going to actually I was asked to go to China to give a lecture on my thing, and they translated Marx's Revenge into Chinese, because when the Chinese are having a debate, I haven't said it in my autobiography. The Chinese were wondering as well, what about capitalism in a communist country? And I was one of the persons they called to speak, and I said, yes, of course, read your Marx. I'll tell you what Marx said about capitalism. So, the single-mindedness with which the Chinese work is what we don't actually have. That is one way an advantage, because there's a lot of diversity, which is why communism will never work in India. But I think, in a sense, the strength India has of its people, India will be all right. It will never be a great power, but it will be all right. I'm sorry to say it will never be a great power, but it'll be a second-rate power. Like UK is. UK became a great power by accident, but UK
Lord
also there's a
Lord Desai,
tremendous.
we are Bisuguru. We are Bisuguru.
Can I just make one?
Sure.
Okay.
I accept that. I mean, I don't think we've got the capacity.
Well, we can't have a discussion. Other people want to ask questions.
Okay, there is
I just want to say one
ambassador from our former ambassador, my friend from Iceland, who joined all the way from Iceland. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself, please, first.
Thank you, Surendra, for.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Meghnad.
Excellency.
Very
Excellency.
nice
Yeah.
seeing you. And my best regards to Kishwar. I hope you're keeping very safe. All of
Yes,
you.
I will tell. Yeah, indeed.
And over the years, I've benefited from being able to pick your brains on this and that topic, and I've enjoyed also your weekly column. I learned a lot from that, and I certainly look forward to reading your book. From what we hear from Gurcharan and Ambassador Sinha, it'll be a very good read. But I have one question. I don't know whether it's Osala or too political. What do you think about Boris Johnson?
Well, Boris is an immensely lucky man. He's very charming. He is very able. When he was mayor of London, he was very successful because at that size, he was able to select good people to do the work. He's lazy. He selects good people and then he lets them, and he is a PR man. Now, what's happening right now, which might make the greatest memoirs any British Prime Minister has had to write, is he has had to be everything he is not. He's had to be serious. He's had to really sit down and do hard work and take unpleasant decisions, convey them. And it's quite remarkable that, what's happened in the last 1 week, or last 10 days, when he reversed his position on relaxation of Christmas days and so on. He first said, you can have Christmas, and 3 days later, he had to shut it down. He doesn't like lockdowns. He doesn't like to shut pubs. He doesn't like to shut theaters. Given him, he would have no regulation. Every let have fun. And so he said, and then at the same time, as luck would have it, Brexit crisis. The real crisis of Brexit settlement has to be done in the next 5-6 days. Luckily for him, these two have come together. So, he's going to escape the hard effect of one of them, because right now we have trucks waiting outside Dover, which we're expecting for the no-deal Brexit. So we are having a rehearsal of no-deal Brexit right now. No, I think he will survive. His main enemies are within his own party. He faces more opposition from his own party right now than he will. But he has a majority of 90. 80, but then because the Sinn Féin, etc., don't come to Parliament, effective majority of 90 in a House of 650. He's unbeatable, and most likely Tories will get back. I'm saying that right now because, and so in terms of being a prime minister, he has very different qualities from say, Cameron or Major. Major had come from modest circumstances. He was very, very kind of, serious, efficient, not liked by his party. Boris is loved by his party. And one of the paradoxes of the last election was there was Boris, whom nobody believed. Nobody believed the word Boris says, but they love him. There was Jeremy Corbyn, who everybody believed every word Jeremy Corbyn said, and they were scared by it. And so they didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Was one truthful man. And they said, we will take Boris's lies, we love Boris. Boris will be all right. And so I think to that extent, he's a very sort of one-off kind of leader. But, he has this thing that these public school people have. Beneath all that, they are very hardworking and very loyal. I'm sorry, not loyal, very hardworking and well-educated. So given the crisis, they have enough general knowledge to be able to cope, and they have enough context around the world to be able to pick up a phone and find out what to do. And Boris is, his family, and his father is still alive, and he's a great man. I sort of like him, and his brothers and all that. I think Boris is going to survive this worst crisis in British history in sort of since end of Second World War. What he does have going for him is that although as a government has not been very competent, people have this idea of solidarity in crisis, which is how they won the Second World War. If trouble comes, the British unite. They don't divide. And amount of voluntary charity work, amount of support, even as they abuse the government, there is this kind of loyalty. that we all have to get together and work ourselves out of this crisis. And so, no, I think Boris is a unique phenomenon, and we haven't had a prime minister like him. But he's charming. What can you do? I guess Macmillan was the nearest one I can think of, although I wasn't in UK when Macmillan had this he used to put on this sort of facade of this old bourgeois gentleman and sort of charm everybody with his style. Boris has style. Margaret Thatcher had no style. She was absolutely fantastic, but she had no style. But Boris has style.
Well, I am glad to see friends from New York. I see Puneet Sapra, I see Ramu Damdaran. I have in the audience the former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, Professor Deepak Panthal.
Oh, yes, indeed, very much. I remember him.
Professor Deepak Panthal would like to ask some question.
I remember him.
Professor Panthal, are you still there?
I'm happy listening to him.
No, but you should ask question.
No. If he's happy, why make him unhappy?
I'm learning a lot. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, anybody else want to ask question? Okay, Lord Desai, I think we have done pretty well. I think you won't realize that from my house, my complex, there was no light for 5 minutes. But you might have not noticed, I saw total blackout, nothing happened from my side. The parents are living in Delhi. I said what to do, because you have to simply wait. Nothing can be done. Now, I would say, look, Lord Desai has himself summed up his life in one line in his book. He says, my life was nothing if not hectic, intellectually, politically, and socially. I think that really aptly sums up. Lord Desai, you have your predictions have come true about Prime Minister Modi, about Donald Trump. What is your prediction about elections in West Bengal 2 years down the line?
Wow.
And at the center in Delhi 2024.
And Surendra, I do have a question if you allow me.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Go
My
ahead.
friend, Lord
Go
Desai,
ahead.
my friend Rajiv Bhatia wants to ask something.
Go ahead.
Rajiv, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Surendra, and thank you very much, Lord Desai. What a absorbing session you have given to us. I really want to profit from your wisdom and knowledge to ask you a question, not to predict future, but intellectually share with us what you think will happen in terms of global geopolitics in the coming year, 2021. Will, for example, US-China relationship improve? Will Russia's relationship with West and China improve? Will China-India relationship improve? Thank you.
I just gave a lecture to the Dehradun whatever it is to train IAS officers and all that. Where Makran Paranjpe is. I call it heteropolity, heteropolar world. What's now happening under Biden's presidency will be very similar to the interwar period of 1919 to 1939 in the following way. Okay, I'm going to drive this hard. The once great power, the US, which was the sole superpower in the 1990s, is no longer as powerful as it used to be. The fact that the Russian can hack all their systems so successfully shows that America is no longer the power. Also, for the first time, America is worried about China in terms of competition in technology, which has never been afraid before. So I think to that extent, Trump was right. Making America great again meant it was not as great as it is. China is a serious challenge, militarily and technologically, to America, and more of a challenge than the Soviet Union was in the 50s and 60s. And so my view is that there is, it's very likely that the world may get into some kind of trouble during Biden's term, because whenever Democrats are in power, they really like foreign interventions and power and all that. They just love this global policing, and it's very likely that the Quad and China may get into a conflict. If it does, then India, of course, is going to be one of the fronts on which the war would be fought. The land war would be fought in the Himalayas. The naval war would be fought in the Pacific, in the Chinese part of the Pacific. And I think one has to take the world seriously. And one habit I have is look at the worst option. Always ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? And I think this is the worst that happen. And don't be surprised if it happens. And the outcome of that conflict is also not predictable. America has never won a land war in Asia, but they have at least won a naval war with Japan in the Pacific. So we will see what happens. It's all system, but I'm very worried about the recent hacking of American systems because if it is that fragile, in a cyber war, and Russia will fight a cyber war with America, they have to really clean up their act very, very quickly.
On that somber note, I think we should call it a day. Thank you very much, Lord Desai. Thank you, Gurcharan. Thank you. Yes, thank you all friends who have joined.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
And I wish we had a hall, then we could have really clapped, but I can clap. I think you all can join in clapping for the participant. And wish good, happy sales for your book, bestseller. Gurcharan is churning out bestsellers every 2 years. And I hope your book will also be bestseller.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Take care. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
It's a very high-powered audience. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yash. Thank you.